speaking. Diane is speaking. I don't have a video though. Let's see, it's stopped.
We can see you.
Oh, we can see you,
You
Mom.
see me?
Yes.
But I can't see you. Let's see here. Okay, there I am. Okay, here we go.
There you go.
Can you see me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Mhm.
Okay,
All right.
I'm here.
You ready?
I'm
Thank
ready.
all of you for coming. This is our first press conference in a Zoom fashion, and it may be the new reality for all of us for a while. But we are glad that you did respond essentially on short notice. This is a press conference where we are expressing grave concerns regarding the circumstances surrounding the death of Costell Akrie. His wife, Diane Akrie, and son, Scott, are also present. And our concerns are that the circumstances surrounding Mr. Akrie's death at the Gateway Center are very disconcerting and strange to us. This is a man, 87-year-old man who lived a wonderful life, Korean vet, married 65 years. He goes into Kaiser Hospital for a condition. He comes out of there. He goes to Gateway for rehabilitation, physical rehabilitation. He's there after about 3 weeks, and they're told that he has the virus, the coronavirus. This was startling. And then within a few days, he passed. Our concerns, though, are based upon what has been reported to us in the news, and also some of the observations of the family. This is a facility that was operating below the standard of acceptable care for patients, and particularly in this era of coronavirus, where a number of people have died, at least 6 to 9 people within a short period of time, which is just shocking. And then many of the staff members, as well as the patients, residents, came down with the virus. Again, this is so disturbing that these kinds of numbers warrant and justify an investigation as to how this facility was operating. And when we look at it, from our point of view, that an investigation is warranted. But I will say that if, in fact, it's true that employees were requested and compelled to work, even though they had symptoms of the virus, and or went to work notwithstanding that, and or they operated without the normal precautions of gloves and masks, that's criminal conduct. And if true, these owners should be prosecuted for allowing that type of conduct. Our view here is, notwithstanding Mr. Akrie's age, he should not be dead as a consequence of the coronavirus. He went there without it, and there's no reason that precautionary measures should not have been taken to ensure that he did not contract the disease. So as a consequence of that, we have filed a complaint for the Department of Public Health in Sacramento. We will eventually, if necessary, file criminal charges with the district attorney's office. But for now, it is important for the family to know that the death of their loved one did not occur without some investigation taking place. We recognize that in this era now, where it looks like a disproportionate number of African-American men and or women are dying as a consequence of the coronavirus, that does not mean that any one of them should not be looked at individually. And this is a case that is not enough to say that he died of disease, and he's of the age that he was, that it should not be looked at more carefully to determine whether it was necessary or not. And so that is why we are here. That is why we have filed a complaint. We understand the pain and that this family has occurred, but we also recognize that it's probably a typical kind of pain. But this is a case where we want to know whether this facility operated below the acceptable standard of care and that they did what they were supposed to do to ensure that their residents and or their employees would not contract the coronavirus. We recognize there are certain conditions that could exist, but if you didn't follow the normal health provisions with gloves and masks and making sure people kept their distances, then it seems to me that that conduct is below the standard of care and certainly warrants an investigation by the Department of Health and Public Health, and certainly consideration should be given, in our view, as to whether criminal charges should be filed. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dante Pointer, a lawyer, co-counsel in this matter out of the office, John Burris' law office, and he will discuss issues, and then we will next have the family talk, the mom, the wife, as well as the son. So Dante, why don't you start next?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Dante Pointer. I'm an attorney with the law offices of John Burris. As you know, we're gathered here because of just what is essentially a very tragic but preventable death that occurred as it relates to Mr. Akrie. His family has been put through untold pain. Our investigation into this incident was one out of compassion and concern, quickly turned into one of outrage and movement to action. When we looked at what had taken place here at Gateway, we realized that the owners, the operators, didn't appear to give any due diligence, any due concern to the livelihood of its staff, as well as to the patients. In fact, they allowed staff, pressured staff to work who they knew were positive for the virus, forcing them to work, compelling them to come into work, such that it put everyone at risk. Not only that staff member, that staff member's family, but also the patients. And these patients that were at Gateway, we all know were a very vulnerable part of our community, a part of our community that's supposed to be even protected even more. Instead, Gateway allowed its staff to come to work without any protective equipment, without any masks, without any gloves. That to us is telltale proof of what we would say is criminal negligence. That was just reckless disregard for the lives and the well-beings of the patients that were there at that facility. What is more, and why we think this is an ongoing public health concern, and why we are
the press conference is going on right now.
Ringing the bell, if you will, is that Gateway continues to admit and allow people to stay there, despite this facility being overran with the virus. And point in fact, when one of Mr. Akrie's family members was going to pick up his personal possessions after he had passed, they saw another patient being admitted into this facility. And that is just unconscionable. It should not happen. And we call, we implore, we demand that the health department for the state of California and all other officials whom this falls under their jurisdiction take action. There should not be one more person endangered. One more person should have to lose their life. One more family that has to go days without getting a chance to communicate and see their loved one, only to find out that they died from something that was wholly preventable.
You know, a man, he goes into this, Mr. Akrie goes into the Gateway for physical rehabilitation treatment. But he comes out dead a few weeks later from the coronavirus. And he did not have it before he went in. And that's troubling to us. So at this moment, I want to have Ms. Akrie.
Okay.
Why don't you tell us about what happened?
What is going on?
My name is Diane Akrie.
No, all you have to do is click on the thing.
I am Costell Akrie's widow. We were married for 65 years prior to his death.
Oh, you're driving. Fuck.
Prior to all this taking place, Costell and I were living independently in our own apartment. He was an active and he participated in weekly exercise classes and read 3 books a week. On February the 13th, at a routine appointment with Kaiser, Kaiser took my husband off of his critical diabetes medication. Despite paramedics having to rush him to the hospital on February the 16th, slightly after midnight, telephone conferences, doctor's visits over the next 3.5 weeks, Kaiser still refused to listen to our family when we pleaded he needed to go back on his diabetes medication. My husband was taken back to Kaiser by the ambulance, and it was discovered that his blood sugar was 700, and he was on the verge of coma. Kaiser finally listened and put him back on his medication. His blood sugar came down and was under control, and his condition improved. But unfortunately, he had suffered the loss of mobility as a result of this error. On March the 5th, Kaiser sent Costell to Gateway Rehab in Hayward, purely for physical rehabilitation. And on Saturday, April the 4th, my wonderful husband and the patriarch of our family passed away at Gateway, having caught the virus. My husband's death was tragic and preventable. He is not with us today because of mistakes and negligence. We believe that the coronavirus is a symptom of his death, but not the root cause of his death. On March the 28th, we called and were told that Costell had a low-grade fever and was being tested for the COVID-19. We were notified by Kaiser 2 days later that in fact he was positive. When we called Gateway to find out about the testing, we were told by personnel at Gateway that 6 other patients had already been diagnosed with the virus, and they were in the process of being tested for 2 other patients in addition to Costell. Costell was in a room by himself for most of the time, and we immediately concluded if he had the virus, he would have had caught it from a staff member. So we asked if the staff had been tested, and were then told that no staff had been tested and that the staff fell into 3 categories. Those that were symptomatic and those that were staying home. Those who were refusing to come to work because of the outbreak and the lack of testing were those that were working, and the remaining staff taking care of 25 to 35 patients each. At no time while visiting Gateway did we ever see staff wearing masks before and after the outbreak. Due to a lockdown by Gateway that began on the 13th of March, we were unable to visit Costell at Gateway And for the last 4 days of his life, despite multiple calls a day, we were unable to speak to him or access his welfare. When we would call, we were transferred to the nurse's station, and the phone would just ring and ring and ring. I never got to say goodbye to my husband of 65 years, or to tell him I loved him during the last 4 days of his life, nor did anyone in our family. I want to conclude by saying Costell was an extraordinary man. He was orphaned and lived in an orphanage until he was 16. He served 4 years in the Air Force in Korea. He then worked his way through college, supporting our family while working 3 jobs. He taught himself the bass, he played the piano, and obtained 2 associate degrees, 2 bachelor's degrees, and 1 master's degree. And he was an avid chess player. In 1963, he led the community group in raising funds to build a well-needed park called Casa Paranga in Oakland, for which he was nationally recognized. He was the chief of Veterans Affairs for the Bay Area Urban League. He was one of the first Black managers at United Airlines. He was honest, he was compassionate, he was good, and he was kind, and always fought for what was right for everyone, regardless of the cost. And this is why we're here.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Scott would like to have his son speak. No?
Hi, everyone. I'm the proud son of Costell and Diane Akrie. And what this has done for us is we believe that there are questions that need to be answered. We don't believe that these questions just need to be answered for us. We believe they need to be answered for the community, for other people that are there, and for other families who may not be fortunate enough to have a voice, and for the elderly there that may not have families that can advocate for them. And I want to just go through some of the questions we have. Why wouldn't Kaiser listen to us regarding the adverse reaction that my father had when he was deprived of his diabetes medicine? He was in the emergency room within 2 days, and we had doctor visits and calls explaining our concerns over the course of the next 3.5 weeks, and they went ignored. Kaiser has at least 1 doctor that performed rounds at Gateway to observe him as well as the conditions there. What did Kaiser know about the conditions at Gateway, and when did they know it? And this is especially important because the Kaiser doctor decided to stop performing rounds at Gateway as a result of the coronavirus outbreak there. And so we want to know who knew what and when they knew it. Did Gateway, in fact, pressure and require staff to work after they were symptomatic or diagnosed with the coronavirus? If they did, from our standpoint, this was criminal. Why didn't Gateway have masks? And if they did, why weren't they using them? At what point after the outbreak began did Gateway stop admitting patients? And did they ever stop admitting patients? And from appearances right now, it looks like they didn't. What basic precautions did Gateway take, and when did they take them? And I think this is really important. We only know of the people that were diagnosed with the coronavirus that died there. Did anyone die of a case of undiagnosed COVID-19 at Gateway this year that simply had not been tested? Obviously, from our perspective, there was an enormous Gateway at an enormous outbreak at Gateway, and we just feel like we need answers to all of these questions so we know what really happened there, and to make sure that this doesn't ever happen in the future to anyone again.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. From our point of view, well, why don't we do this here? That we will answer any questions. We will take those questions and answer them. Just indicate who you are. Dante, why don't you control the mic here?
Sure.
Okay, any questions?
Are there any questions from any reporters? You can, I believe everyone is.
Yeah.
We're gonna, obviously, this is new, so we need everybody to not step on one another, just try one at a time, okay? Thank you.
It's Laura Anthony with Channel 7. Hi, you guys.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that we're clear that the patient he was only there for rehab after being at Kaiser, correct? He was not a longtime resident.
Correct. He was only at Gateway for rehabilitation purposes.
Yeah, physical rehab, so.
Physical rehab.
So he'd only been there a few weeks at the most?
I think he went on March the 5th. He went. And he passed on April 4th. So he was there for that 1 month.
Got it.
Dante, this is Annie with the East Bay Times and Mercury News. Can you guys talk a little bit about the nature of the complaint you filed with the Department of Health, and have you heard from them that they are indeed, conducting an investigation?
Sure, we filed a complaint with the department, essentially letting the department know about the conditions that were taking place there at Gateway. The fact that the staff didn't have personal protective equipment, about the fact that staff was being pressured to work despite being positive for the virus, and in which the way in which the center was understaffed. So we let the department know. We filed a formal complaint. We did hear back from the department. We're looking forward to having further discussions about their investigation. They do have a timeline for investigating these types of things, and we're hoping that they'll not only share their findings, but also more so what's going to take place now that this has become widely known to the public, and what they're going to do to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
In addition, as John Burris, it's certainly been reported that this facility has been under investigation before, and that complaints have been made against them for the type of practices that they have had. So I would assume that the department has had some prior history with them that should have put them on notice about the kind of treatment and manner in which they ran the facility. Next question.
Anyone else?
Hi, Jackie Ward from Channel 5 here. I spoke to Diane on Friday, and she was saying that she was still having problems communicating with Gateway. Have they been at all more receptive to your requests for information? Are you still trying to find out the exact circumstances that Costell was under prior to his passing?
Well, we don't have any direct information from them as of yet. This is the very early stages. I think the questions that have been raised here are the ones, the answers that we want. We will be communicating with them as well in a traditional way by making formal requests for certain kinds of information, recognizing that it could be a little challenging because of privacy issues, but efforts have to be made. And we cannot allow nothing to occur under these circumstances. At the very least, Gateway is on notice that that people are watching how they treat the patients and their employees. So that's a very important part here from a deterrent point of view.
If I may, the thing here that, and it cannot be overemphasized, is given what we understand and the way in which care was being administered or not administered at Gateway, they essentially handed people who we know to be the most vulnerable a death sentence by conducting their affairs in the way in which it's been described. And that is criminal to us. Not only is it an administrative investigation, but there certainly needs to be a criminal investigation.
Dante, I'd just like to add something. When we initially found out that my father had been diagnosed and that they were,
1 second, Mr. Akrie. There's someone out there that has their GPS going. Can you please just put your stuff on mute? We can hear you. Thank you.
Actually, Haley Mills would please have her mute her phone. Mute her phone. See?
What is this?
We're okay. All right, we'll go from there.
So, I think one of the things that's important to note is that we were so concerned, even after my father had been diagnosed, that the family called the mayor's office in Hayward, and that to the best of our knowledge, the first time that masks actually appeared at Gateway were when the fire department took them out there as a result of this phone call. And the only reason that we are aware of this is because the fire department called our family back and told us that they went out there to distribute masks. So I think that Mr. Pointer's point regarding personal protection equipment is a major concern of us.
I recognize this has to be viewed, the equipment has to be viewed in the context of what's going on perhaps nationally in terms of the shortages and availability of certain types of equipment. And so the question is, did that really happen in terms of the shortage at Gateway? When did that happen? What efforts were made to resupply, if at all? And what efforts were made to make additional accommodations? I mean, after all, we now know that masks can be, it doesn't have to be, if you run out, then you make do. You figure out how to wait to get it done, because at the end of the day, you try not to spread the virus. So we don't know any of that. We just know that there were no masks there, and that appeared to be no gloves as well. So those are issues that we are very much mindful of and concerned about.
So at one point, I read something that Gateway was moving their current infected patients to one side of the building. Do you have any idea about what the current state for the people still at Gateway is right now, and if they have been separated?
No, we have no direct information as to that point. We know that we read that in the newspapers as well. We also know that they're still taking patients. So I don't know that that's enough in and of itself, because you still have to practice the other forms of basic safety, hygiene safety. So we don't know the answer to that. I am glad, though, that because of the attention that's given here, that efforts are being made to at least seek to protect patients and or employees. Whether it's enough, I don't know, but that doesn't in any way excuse what has taken place in the past. And if in fact what has taken place that has resulted in Mr. Akrie's death and on a circumstance when it should not have occurred, well, that accountability has to occur, period.
Agreed. Is there anyone else with questions?
You guys, please email.
This is Chris Vellucci with Courthouse News. Can you share that complaint that you filed and the response from the state?
Sure, we can share the complaint. It was filed online, so unfortunately the narrative section is not complete in terms of what you're able to see. We can make that available. And in terms of the response, we have not received a written response as of yet, but I will say we did receive a very quick and phone call from the state. And so we're going to follow up with them about that.
Okay, thanks.
This is Laura Anthony again. Can you please share the complaint, email it to us, whatever you can share. And then could the family please email us pictures of Costell that they would like us to include with our story, and if we could get those via email and full-size good resolution, that would be great.
Sure. So I'll direct you to our website, which if you happen to receive our press conference statement, or you can just go to our website, there is a page on there for Mr. Akrie's case. And on it, we have a couple of pictures as well as the press conference release. And we'll also post the complaint that we filed. So you'll have one place to go get all the information. Will that work for you all?
Yeah, we just want to make sure the pictures are the best possible quality. Sometimes pulling them off of a web page isn't that great. So if somebody could send them directly to us full size, that would be better.
It would be great if you, given that we have so many requests, I'd love to get them to you. If you just shoot me an email, I'll be sure to respond with the information.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
John and Adante, I have another question. This is Annie with the East Bay Times. have you alerted the district attorney to this? Do you know if they are conducting a criminal investigation at this point?
We don't know, and it certainly is our plan to send them a letter requesting that they conduct an investigation, because frankly, this is elderly abuse. And, you know, there are laws against mistreating senior citizens in ways that is below the normal standard of care that you would do to someone else. And that's what we're looking at here, is whether or not they criminal negligence and how they treated him and measured because of his age and because of the propensity of the virus that's out there that caused them to treat more laxly than not. We don't know that, but I think that the district attorney's office should investigate this. We have at least 6 to 9 people dead out of one facility. That's just unconscionable. And if nothing else, that warrants an investigation by the district attorney's office as well as the state. Okay.
All right, any other questions?
One more, just to make sure we're all on the same page about how to pronounce is it Mr. Akrie or Akrie?
Akrie,
Akrie.
A-K-R-I-E.
And his first name
Costell.
is Costell. Thank you, Mom.
Costell Akrie. Thank you very much. Take care.
Okay.
All right, thank you everybody for coming out and for covering this very important situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Mhm.